species in the state's water bodies. My name is Amy Smagula, and I'm a freshwater biologist with the Department of Environmental Services, where I coordinate the exotic species program. This presentation will go over a variety of topics, all related to aquatic invasive species, or AIS, as I sometimes refer to them. First, I'll start off with an overview of aquatic invasive species, what they are and what they do. I'll talk about some of the common plants and animals that fall into the invasive category in the state. I'll talk specifically about some of the considerations for summer camp operations as they relate to AIS. Then I'll talk about some of the best management practices for summer camps, what the Department of Environmental Services does, and then what to do if you believe you have an aquatic invasive species in your water body. So first off, aquatic invasive species, or AIS, are non-native plant or animal species. And by non-native, I mean those that have not evolved over the course of hundreds of years or thousands of years in New Hampshire. So they were brought in either purposely or accidentally and introduced into state water bodies. And they also cause harm to the ecology, economics of systems, and potentially to human health. So those are the key characteristics. In New Hampshire, we actually list 29 aquatic plants as invasive and prohibited, and there are several animal species that fall under that same category as well. In New Hampshire, there are at least 92 infested water bodies that we are aware of. 81 of those are lakes and ponds that are greater than 10 acres, and 11 of those are river systems in the state. In addition, we have other characteristics about invasive species beyond the 3 that are listed in that top bullet there. These invasive species can cause water bodies to become impaired. They can negatively change water quality, and they can generally reduce the overall values of recreation and aesthetic uses of water bodies. So across the board, they have a lot of negatives when it comes to their impacts on water bodies and the public. So we'll go through an overview of some of the really common aquatic invasive species in New Hampshire that you may encounter. We're going to start first with plants. And the milfoils are probably some of the longer known invasive species in New Hampshire. Variable milfoil's been in New Hampshire since the 1960s, and it has spread widely to over 70 water bodies across the state. The plant has feather-like leaves that are whorled around the main stem, and they are very dense stems with a lot of leaves, and that they're quite bushy in appearance. On the right-hand side is Eurasian water milfoil, and it looks similar to the variable milfoil, except it's not quite as dense along the stem for the leaf whorls. The bottom 2 photos show you what these 2 plants look like in water bodies. Variable milfoil on the bottom left and Eurasian water milfoil on the bottom right. And both of these plants have the potential to get 10 to 15 feet tall in water bodies, which is pretty tall, and they can choke out much of the nearshore zone or the shallows where the plants root. I should mention that there are a number of native milfoils in New Hampshire, and for all of these invasive aquatic plants that I'm going to go through, there are native lookalikes. So identification can be tricky if you're unfamiliar with it. So always be sure to double check to make sure if something is invasive or not. Fanwort is another one that is fairly common in New Hampshire. While it's only in 9 water bodies, it does populate most of those along the southern tier of New Hampshire. It looks like milfoil when it's in the water, as you can see on that left-hand photo. But when you take it out of the water and look at it a little bit more closely, you see that it does not have feather-like leaves, but instead it has fan-shaped leaves that are opposite each other along the main stem. This one can also grow 10 to 12 feet tall. The milfoils and the fanworts all reproduce by fragmentation, so pieces of the plant broken off can drift and settle and then grow new plants. Brazilian Ledhydrilla and Hydrilla, these also spread by fragmentation. They look a little different than the ones that I just showed you. They have more needle-like leaves. If you have needle-like leaves that are in whorls of 4 or more or 5 or more, that is probably an invasive species. We do have 2 native species that look a lot like this. Those have whorls of leaves that are in 3 or less. So that is one of the identifying characteristics of this plant, among others, but it's always good to get a second look at these because they can be tricky. The Brazilian Ledhydrilla and the Hydrilla can both grow 25 feet tall, much taller than any of the other invasive aquatic plants. And because of that, they can grow out deeper, or if they're growing in the shallows, they may grow to the surface and then canopy over the surface, causing a mat of vegetation at the surface. So they are quite aggressive in their growth. Water chestnut is just in 2 locations in New Hampshire. It's in the Nashua River and in the Connecticut River. And this one is rooted to the bottom, and this rosette of leaves floats on the surface of the water, and it can get quite thick. The plants will stack up on one another, and the plant growth can be 6 to 12 inches thick on the surface of the water body. It can also grow quite easily in lakes and ponds, so it is a risk to a lot of water bodies. This little seed on the bottom right is very woody, and the spines are very sharp. So they are a hazard for stepping on them on lake and river bottoms, but they also, if you pick them up, can get stuck in your finger. So they are an injury risk. And then the last plant that I'll cover is European naiad. It's also known as brittle naiad. And this one has become a problem in New Hampshire in recent years. We hadn't seen it before, and now it's in a number of water bodies across the state. And it is very brittle, and it will break off into these little tufts of leaf clusters, which ordinarily wouldn't be a problem because the plant doesn't spread by a fragment like the other plants I talked about, except this one could have seeds attached to it and drift and settle elsewhere, and those seeds are what are going to cause new plants to grow in the next year. If you take a close look at these, you can see that the edges of the leaves are very toothed or serrated, so that's a very characteristic identification tool for these, and they also have leaves that curl back rather sharply in an arc downward. The plants only grow about 6 to 12 inches tall on the bottom of water bodies, except they can get very thick and form this dense, low cover over the bottom. Some information about invasive animals. We have clams and mussels that are a risk. So the upper left photo is Asian clam. We do have these in about 9 or 10 water bodies in New Hampshire. There's a coin there for scale, and these are rounder snails with really prominent ridges on the shell, and they may not be on the bottom of the lake. They may burrow deep into the sediment on the bottom of the lake, so you may not see them casually when observing the sediment. You may need to dig down and see if they're mixed in with the sediment. Over on the right-hand side is zebra mussel. That one is not yet in New Hampshire, but it is in nearby states, so it is a risk. It has these sticky hair-like strands that come out of the shell, and that allows them to stick to hard surfaces like boats and buoys or docks. So you'll find these attached to surfaces. This is about the size of a pistachio nut, so also not large. So it is something that you would have to look fairly closely for. This nice photo here, second one down on the left, is a nice comparison of sizes. New Hampshire has a number of native mussels in our state. Many of them are dark colored, like brown or blackish, but they're very oval and they're much larger than the invasive clams and mussels. You can see a size comparison in this photo with Asian clam and the native mussel here. And then the Chinese mystery snail. This one at the bottom, especially this photo, is a good indication of size. These can actually get to be about the size of a golf ball, so they can get pretty large. You will know it if you step on these on the lake bottom. They're very big. And while they're not sharp, they do hurt your feet if you step on them barefooted. They are in many lakes across the state, unfortunately. They do have microscopic larvae, which help them to spread. And with their sticky foot, they can attach to surfaces and move around. They do eat a lot of algae out of the water, but they have the problem in that they are kind of smelly, but they also have a bacteria in them that can cause gastroenteritis. So there is the risk of public health impact here as a result of this snail. And then the last animal that I'll mention is the spiny water flea. We don't have this in New Hampshire yet. We do have a number of native water fleas, which are completely fine. You barely notice they're there unless you're looking for them. But these guys are a little bit bigger, and they also have these big glass-like spines that come off from them, and that spine is the issue. Typically, when fish eat the native water fleas, there's no problem. But when they consume these spiny water fleas, this glass-like tail sticks into the digestive tract of the fish and can cause health issues for the fish in terms of them eating well and getting enough nutrition because they can't digest those spines as well. So these are something that could be ending up in a water body near us as a result of boating activities or moving bait and other things around. So how does all this relate to summer camps when it comes to aquatic invasive species and summer camp activities? So campers and camp staff may encounter aquatic invasive species at the camp beach or out on the water body while they're recreating, if the camp happens to be on an infested water body in the state. So a lot of activities could put people in contact with these: swimming, boating, floating on the water, wading into the water. Even activities like wakeboarding and water skiing could be a problem for spread, but also impaired by dense growths of invasive species. So all these activities could put people in contact with invasives and potentially at risk to public health, but also to spreading invasives. When it comes to animals, those could be a problem on the lake bed if there are people that are in wading and there are sharp shells on the bottom. Feet can be cut and people can be injured as a result. And also, like I mentioned, some of these snails have the potential to carry bacteria that can cause gastroenteritis. And when it comes to plants, a lot of the concern with plants is entanglement. So if we have very tall plants that are thick near a swim area, then swimmers could become tangled up in those plants. And we do know of a couple of cases, not in New Hampshire, but in other states, where drownings have occurred in thick invasive aquatic plant beds. And also other concerns are further spreading of the plants with activities, boating, swimming, fishing through dense beds of plants that will chop the plants up and cause them to spread and cause further infestation around the water body. So what can you do? Be on the lookout for anything that could be invasive. If you are unsure of something, send a picture by email of plants or animals that you'd like identified. The email is provided here. And for identification and guidance, we will get back to you right away with an identification and let you know if we're aware of the infestation or if it seems to be a new infestation. We recommend that you avoid boating through dense aquatic plant beds to minimize fragmentation. The odds are that most of the plants that you're going to encounter are natives, but in the chance that they are invasive, we would like to have these plants contained and not have them spread further. Avoid swimming through plants to avoid entanglement issues, and have campers avoid areas where there are a lot of snails and clams on the bottom because of potential for cutting of feet and other injury. So what does the Department of Environmental Services do? We provide oversight for activities in state water bodies when it comes to aquatic invasive species. We provide grant funds for management. We do surveys of infestations. And then we also focus on outreach and education activities and activities related to prevention of new infestations. And we do partner with a lot of groups to get the word out as much as possible about all of these steps. So if you have an AIS in the water body where your camp is located and it's not currently being managed, please reach out to us and let us know, and we will follow up with a site assessment and then some recommended management actions. Please don't try to manage these yourself because you could cause them to spread further. Please just contact DES and we will come and assess. It takes all of us to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, so I thank you for your attention, and please feel free to reach out to me at this email if you have any questions. Thank you.